The ache was a permanent resident in Clara's chest, a tenant that had signed a lifelong lease 2 years, 7 months, and 3 days ago. It paid its rent in stolen glances and words left unspoken. It was a dull throb that sharpened into a blade whenever Maya laughed, a sound like wind chimes that Clara felt in her very bones. Tonight, the ache was a particularly cruel landlord, demanding its due as Clara sat on their worn floral sofa, pretending to read a book while the real story unfolded across the room. Maya was on the phone with Ben. Again. She was pacing the length of their small living room, one hand tangled in her honey-blonde hair, the other gesturing wildly as she spoke into the phone pressed to her ear. The warm, golden light from the floor lamp caught the frustrated tears glistening in her eyes, turning them into tiny, shattered stars. Clara's heart twisted into a knot so tight she could barely breathe. She wanted to cross the room, take the phone from Maya's hand, and tell Ben to leave her alone forever. She wanted to wrap her arms around Maya and absorb all her unhappiness into herself, to be a shield against the world and its endless supply of unworthy men. But she could not, because she was just Clara, the supportive roommate, the best friend, the keeper of secrets, and the shoulder to cry on. Her role in Maya's life was clearly defined, a box drawn in permanent marker, and stepping outside of it was a risk she was too terrified to take. Losing this painful, beautiful proximity, would be worse than the ache itself. It would be a void. No, Ben, you don't get it. Maya's voice cracked, pulling Clara from her spiraling thoughts. It's not about the dinner. It was never about the dinner. It's about the fact that you don't listen. You hear the words, but you don't listen. Clara's fingers tightened on the edge of her paperback, the corner of the cover digging into her palm. She knew this script by heart. It was a play they had rehearsed a dozen times. The argument, the tears, the temporary makeup, and then the cycle repeating a few weeks later. Ben was not a bad person. He was just obtuse. He saw Maya as a beautiful, shining object to have in his life, but he seemed incapable of understanding the intricate, brilliant person who inhabited that beauty. He loved the idea of Maya, but Clara was quite certain he did not have a clue about Maya herself. He did not know that Maya hummed off-key when she was concentrating on a painting, or that she had a tiny scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood fall that was only visible in a certain light. He did not know that she smelled like vanilla and lavender, even hours after her morning shower, or that the first sip of her morning coffee was a sacred ritual that could not be interrupted. Clara knew all of these things. She had cataloged them in the quiet library of her heart, each one a precious, forbidden text. Finally, with a choked sob and a sharp, "I can't do this right now," Maya ended the call. The silence that descended upon the room was heavy, thick with frustration and defeat. Maya stood with her back to Clara for a long moment, her shoulders shaking. Then she slowly turned, her face pale and tear-streaked. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice rough. Clara immediately closed her book and set it aside. "Don't be sorry. Are you okay?" The question felt stupid and hollow. Of course she was not okay. Maya gave a weak, watery smile that did not reach her hazel eyes. Those eyes, usually so bright and full of life, were clouded over. "Define okay." She crossed the room and sank onto the sofa next to Clara, curling her legs up underneath her. The space between them, usually a comfortable buffer, now felt charged with 1,000 volts of unspoken energy. The heat radiating from Maya's body was a physical presence, a warmth that beckoned Clara closer, while a siren in her head screamed for her to keep her distance. He doesn't see me," Maya said, her voice barely audible. She rested her head back against the cushions and stared at the ceiling. "It's like I'm speaking a different language. I try to explain what I need, what I feel, and he just hands me a bouquet of flowers and thinks it fixes everything." "I see you," Clara wanted to scream. "I see every single part of you, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever known." Instead, she said, "He's trying in his own way, I guess." It was the neutral, supportive friend thing to say. It was also a lie, and it tasted like ash in her mouth. "His way isn't enough," Maya whispered. She turned her head, her gaze finally meeting Clara's. The vulnerability there was a physical blow, knocking the air from Clara's lungs. Is it too much to ask for? To want someone who just gets it? Without needing a 10-page manual and a diagram. No, Clara said, her own voice coming out softer than she intended. It's not too much to ask. Maya held her gaze for a second longer, a strange, unreadable emotion flickering in the depths of her eyes. It was a look Clara had never seen before, and it made her heart perform a frantic, hopeful, terrifying somersault. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. Maya sighed and dropped her head onto Clara's shoulder. The contact was electric. A wildfire raced through Clara's veins, starting from the point where Maya's soft hair tickled her neck and spreading to every nerve ending in her body. She froze, every muscle tensed. She could feel the gentle weight of Maya's head, smell the faint, sweet scent of her shampoo. It was too much. It was not nearly enough. You always know what to say, Maya murmured against her shoulder, her voice thick with exhaustion. Clara did not say anything. She could not. She just sat there, a statue carved from longing, providing comfort that was tearing her apart from the inside out. This was her stasis, her carefully balanced purgatory. She was the anchor in Maya's storm, and she knew, with a certainty that was both a comfort and a curse, that she would let herself drown before she ever let Maya drift away. The breaking point arrived not with a thunderclap, but with the quiet click of the apartment door opening a week later. It was well past midnight, and a storm was raging outside, mirroring the one that had been brewing in Maya's life. Clara was in the kitchen, nursing a cup of chamomile tea and trying to silence the anxious hum in her mind when Maya stumbled in, soaked to the bone and looking utterly shattered. Her mascara had run in dark rivers down her cheeks, and her clothes were plastered to her skin. She was shivering, but it seemed to be from more than just the cold. She dropped her keys on the counter with a clatter that sounded deafening in the quiet apartment. Maya? Clara was on her feet instantly, her heart hammering against her ribs. What happened? Where's your coat? Maya looked up, and the desolation in her eyes was so profound it made Clara physically ache. It's over, she said, her voice a hollow shell of its usual vibrancy. I ended it. For real this time. Clara's mind went blank. This was it. The moment she had secretly, shamefully wished for. But seeing Maya this broken, this completely undone, erased any trace of selfish satisfaction. All she felt was a deep, protective urge to fix it, to make the pain go away. Oh, Maya, she moved forward and, without a second thought, wrapped her arms around Maya's trembling frame. Maya collapsed against her, burying her face in the crook of Clara's neck, and finally let go of the dam she had been holding back. Sobs racked her body, great, shuddering gasps of grief and relief and terror all rolled into one. Clara just held on, stroking her wet hair and murmuring soft, meaningless words of comfort. She held her until the shivering subsided and the sobs quieted into exhausted hiccups. Let's get you out of these wet clothes, Clara said gently, her voice strained with the effort of keeping her own emotions in check. She led Maya to her bedroom, found her a soft, worn t-shirt and a pair of flannel pajama pants, and turned away to give her privacy while she changed. The intimacy of the moment was a blade twisting in her gut. She was tending to Maya's broken heart, a heart broken by someone else, while her own was silently screaming. When Maya was changed, she stood by the bed, looking small and lost. I can't sleep in my room, she whispered, her eyes darting towards the door of the bedroom she had shared with Ben on the nights he stayed over. Too many memories. Clara's throat went dry. You can take my bed. I'll sleep on the couch. No, Maya's voice was firm, though it trembled. She took a hesitant step closer. I don't want to be alone. Is it okay if I just stay in here with you? The world tilted on its axis. Time seemed to slow down, each second stretching into an eternity as Clara processed the request. Maya, in her bed. The thought was both a dream and a nightmare. A temptation of unimaginable proportions. Of course, Clara heard herself say, the words feeling like they were coming from someone else. Her own bed, a space that was entirely hers, a sanctuary of her secret love, was about to be invaded by the very subject of that love. She pulled back the covers on her double bed, a silent invitation. Maya slipped under the sheets without a word, curling into a tight ball on the far side, as if trying to take up as little space as possible. Clara hesitated for a moment, then walked around to her own side and got in, her movements stiff and uncertain. The mattress dipped with her weight, and the distance between them felt both like a vast chasm and a dangerously thin wire. For a long time, they lay in silence, the only sounds the soft patter of rain against the window pane and the frantic beating of Clara's own heart. The air was thick with unspoken things, with the ghost of Ben and the raw, fragile newness of this situation. Then, Maya's voice, small and fragile in the darkness. "Clara." "Yeah, thank you." "Anytime," Clara whispered back, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. She lay awake for hours, acutely aware of every breath Maya took, of the warmth of her body just inches away. This was the catalyst. A line had been crossed, the familiar landscape of their friendship had irrevocably shifted, and Clara had no idea what lay on the other side. All she knew was that she was terrified. And for the first time in a long time, a tiny, treacherous flicker of hope ignited in the darkness of her heart. The days that followed were a study in fragile intimacy. Maya did not move back to her own bed. Each night, she would slip into Clara's, keeping a respectable distance, their shared presence a silent comfort against the raw edges of her breakup. But the distance began to shrink, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. A foot brushing against a leg in the night, a hand briefly resting on an arm. Each accidental touch was a jolt to Clara's system, a spark in the tinderbox of her emotions. Their late-night conversations, once held on the sofa, now took place in the hushed sanctuary of Clara's bedroom. Propped up against pillows, with only a single bedside lamp casting a soft glow, the world shrank to just the two of them. "I feel like I was playing a part," Maya confessed one night, her voice a low murmur. She was tracing patterns on the duvet with her finger, her eyes focused on the mindless motion. The supportive girlfriend. The cool girlfriend who didn't mind when his friends came over. It was exhausting. I don't think he ever really knew who I was. I'm not even sure I knew who I was supposed to be in that relationship. Clara watched her, her heart aching with a fierce, protective love. "You're supposed to be you, Maya. That's all. The right person won't ask you to be anything else." Maya looked up, her gaze soft and searching in the dim light. "What if I don't know who that is anymore?" "Then you get to figure it out," Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And that's not a bad thing. It's a chance to start over." "With you," Maya said, and it was not a question. It was a statement of fact, of reliance, that sent a warm and terrifying thrill through Clara. The physical boundary continued to dissolve. One evening, they were on the couch watching some mindless comedy, a bowl of popcorn shared between them. Maya, who had been leaning against the armrest, slowly shifted until her head was resting in Clara's lap. The gesture was so natural, so unassuming, that Clara's breath caught in her throat. She froze, her hand hovering in the air, before she slowly, cautiously, lowered it to rest on Maya's hair. The strands were silky, soft as spun gold beneath her fingertips. She began to gently stroke Maya's head, her fingers tracing the curve of her scalp. Maya let out a soft sigh of contentment and snuggled deeper, her eyes closing. "That feels nice," she mumbled, her voice already thick with sleep. Clara's heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of her chest. This was a new level of intimacy, a casual domesticity that felt more real and profound than any grand romantic gesture she could imagine. She sat there for the entire length of the movie, and then for an hour after, long after the credits had rolled and the screen had gone dark, just so she would not disturb Maya. She studied the peaceful expression on her sleeping face, the gentle rise and fall of her shoulders with each breath. She memorized the dusting of freckles across her nose, the way a stray lock of hair fell across her cheek. It was in these quiet moments that Clara started to notice the change. It was not just her own hyper-awareness anymore. She began to catch Maya looking at her in a way she never had before. It would happen at random moments. While Clara was making coffee in the morning, her back to the room, she would get a prickling sensation on her skin, and when she turned, she would find Maya watching her with a soft, contemplative expression. One afternoon, Clara was laughing at something on her laptop, a deep, genuine laugh that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. When her laughter subsided, she looked up to see Maya staring at her from the armchair, her lips slightly parted, a look of pure wonder on her face. As soon as their eyes met, Maya blinked and looked away quickly, a faint blush creeping up her neck. The most heart-stopping moment came a few weeks after the breakup. They were sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by takeout containers, talking about nothing and everything. Clara was telling a story from her childhood, her hands moving as she spoke, her face animated. In the middle of a sentence, she noticed that Maya's gaze was not on her eyes, but on her mouth. It was a fleeting thing, a dip of her eyes that lasted no more than a second, but for Clara, time stood still. She saw the flicker of curiosity, the hint of a question in Maya's expression before she looked back up, her own eyes wide, as if she had been caught doing something she should not have. Clara's words faltered, her train of thought completely derailed. She trailed off, her cheeks burning. "Sorry," Maya said quickly, her voice a little too high. "What were you saying?" "Nothing." "It wasn't important," Clara managed to say, her pulse thundering in her ears. Hope was a dangerous, invasive weed. It had taken root in the cracks of her carefully constructed defenses, and now it was threatening to tear the whole structure down. Was she imagining it? Was she projecting her own desperate longing onto Maya's grief-fueled need for comfort? Or was something real and new and terrifyingly beautiful beginning to grow between them in the ruins of Maya's old life? She did not know, and the not knowing was a special kind of torture. Every day was a tightrope walk between ecstasy and despair. The casual touches, the lingering looks, the late-night confessions, they were either the foundation of a future she had only ever dreamed of, or they were the building blocks of the most devastating heartbreak of her life. And there was absolutely no way to tell which it was. The tension became a living entity in the apartment, a third roommate that followed them from room to room. It was in the charged silence when their hands brushed while reaching for the same coffee mug. It was in the air, thick and humming, when they lay side by side in bed, pretending to be asleep, both acutely aware of the other's breathing. Clara felt like she was holding her breath, waiting for a storm to break that would either clear the air or destroy everything in its path. Fearing her own hope, fearing that she was misreading every signal, Clara began to retreat. It was a subtle withdrawal, a subconscious act of self-preservation. She started putting a little more space between them on the couch. She found reasons to go to bed earlier, to avoid the intimate darkness of their shared room. She kept her hands to herself, resisting the urge to smooth a stray hair from Maya's face or rest a hand on her back. She was trying to rebuild the walls that had been so thoroughly dismantled, brick by painful brick. She thought she was being subtle. She was wrong. It came to a head on a quiet Tuesday night. Clara was at her desk, pretending to answer emails, the screen a meaningless blur in front of her. Maya had been quiet all evening, watching her with a troubled, unreadable expression. Finally, she pushed herself out of the armchair she'd been curled in and walked over to stand behind Clara's chair. "You've been avoiding me," Maya said. It was not an accusation, just a quiet statement of fact that landed with the weight of a physical blow. Clara's shoulders tensed. She kept her eyes fixed on the screen. "I haven't. I've just been busy with work." The lie was thin and brittle. "No, you haven't," Maya insisted, her voice soft but firm. "You've been distant for the past week. It's like you're a million miles away. Did I do something? Did I cross a line?" Clara closed her eyes. "You have no idea." The irony was a bitter pill. Maya was worried she had crossed a line, while Clara was living on a completely different continent of unspoken feelings. "No, Maya, you didn't do anything," Clara said, her voice tight. She could not bring herself to turn around, to face the inevitable questions in Maya's eyes. "Then what is it?" Maya's voice was closer now. She placed her hands on the back of Clara's chair, her fingers just inches from Clara's shoulders. The proximity was agonizing. "Talk to me, Clara. Please. You're my best friend." I can't. I can't stand this silence between us. It's worse than the fighting with Ben. It's worse than anything. The raw vulnerability in Maya's voice was the final crack in Clara's composure. Her carefully constructed dam of self-control began to crumble. She could not do this anymore. She could not live this half-life, this lie of supportive friendship. Slowly, she swiveled in her chair to face Maya. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. Maya was looking down at her, her face etched with concern and a deep, genuine hurt. "What aren't you telling me?" Maya asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. The direct question hung in the air between them, impossible to ignore, impossible to deflect. This was it. The point of no return. Clara opened her mouth to speak, to say something, anything, to lie, to confess, to shatter everything, but no words came out. Seeing the panic and conflict warring in Clara's eyes, Maya's expression softened. A look of dawning comprehension crossed her face, as if pieces of a puzzle were finally clicking into place. "This isn't just about me and Ben, is it?" Maya whispered, her gaze searching Clara's. "This is about us." Clara could only manage a small, jerky nod, the admission feeling like a surrender. Maya sank to her knees in front of the chair, so they were at eye level. She reached out and tentatively took one of Clara's trembling hands in her own. Her touch was warm and steady. "I've been so confused," Maya began, her voice barely audible. She did not look away, her hazel eyes holding Clara's captive. "Ever since the breakup, ever since I started. I don't know, really seeing you, things have felt different. Everything has felt different." She took a shaky breath. "I thought it was just the grief. I thought I was just clinging to you because you're safe. You're the one person in the world who has never let me down. But it's more than that, isn't it?" Clara's vision was blurring with unshed tears. She could not speak. She could only listen as Maya put words to the very things she had been too afraid to even hope for. "I lie in bed at night," Maya continued, her thumb stroking the back of Clara's hand, sending shivers up her arm. "And I listen to you breathe. And I feel calm, calmer than I've ever felt with anyone. And then I think about my life before, with Ben, and it feels like a movie I was watching about someone else. It doesn't feel real." She paused, her expression turning to one of profound, terrifying discovery. "The only thing that feels real anymore," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "is you." The confession hung between them, fragile and monumental. It was not a declaration of love, not yet, but it was something just as powerful. It was the truth. "I think," Maya's voice dropped even lower, a secret shared in the quiet confessional of their living room. "I think I might not be as straight as I always thought I was." She let out a shaky laugh, a sound of pure, bewildered awe. "And I think I've been thinking about what it would be like to kiss you." The world stopped. The air left Clara's lungs in a rush, and for a dizzying second, she thought she might faint. Maya had said it. She had taken the most secret, deeply buried desire of Clara's heart and spoken it out loud. The words were a key, unlocking a door Clara had long since bolted shut. And through that door, a torrent of emotion, years of it, came rushing out. The dam broke. A single tear escaped and traced a hot path down Clara's cheek. Then another. Soon, she was crying, not with sadness, but with the overwhelming, gut-wrenching relief of being seen, of being understood. "Oh, Clara," Maya breathed, her own eyes filling with tears. She squeezed Clara's hand tighter. "You have no idea," Clara finally choked out, the words raw and torn from the deepest part of her. "Maya, you have no idea." "Tell me," Maya urged, her voice a gentle plea. "Please, tell me everything." And so she did. The words, once so impossible, now poured out of her. "It's not just since the breakup for me," Clara began, her voice trembling but gaining strength with each word. "It's been for years." Maya's eyes widened, a flicker of shock followed by a wave of something else, understanding, regret, awe. "How long?" Maya whispered. 2 years, Clara confessed, the truth a weight lifting from her soul. 7 months. And, about a week, the precision of it seemed to hang in the air, a testament to the thousands of silent moments she had spent counting, waiting, longing. Every time you cried over him, a part of me was dying. Every time you told me about a fight, I wanted to scream. I love you, Maya. I think I've been in love with you since the day you moved in and we stayed up all night talking and you told me your dream was to paint a mural that covered an entire city block. The whole unvarnished truth was out. It lay between them, terrifying and beautiful and utterly transformative. Clara's confession was not met with shock or revulsion, but with a look of profound clarity on Maya's face. It was as if Clara's words were the final, crucial piece of a puzzle Maya had been trying to solve her entire life. Everything, the failed relationships, the feeling of playing a role, the profound sense of something missing, it all suddenly made a perfect, heartbreaking sense. "Oh, Clara," Maya breathed, her voice filled with wonder. She reached up with her free hand and gently wiped a tear from Clara's cheek with her thumb. The touch was featherlight, but it grounded Clara, pulling her back from the precipice of her own vulnerability. "All this time. You were right here, all this time." It was not a question. It was a revelation. "I was so stupid," Maya whispered, more to herself than to Clara. "I was looking for a feeling, a connection. I was looking for it in all the wrong places, with all the wrong people. Because it was already here. It was with you." She leaned closer, her face just inches from Clara's. The air between them crackled with an energy that was both new and ancient. It was the culmination of years of friendship and weeks of burgeoning, unspoken desire. Clara could see the flecks of gold in Maya's hazel eyes, could feel the warmth of her breath on her skin. "I think," Maya said, her voice a soft, tremulous whisper that seemed to vibrate through Clara's entire being, "I think I'm falling in love with you, Clara." And then, as if the world could not possibly hold any more tension, as if the universe itself was demanding a release, Maya asked the question that changed everything. "Can I kiss you?" Time fractured. For Clara, the question was not just a question. It was absolution. It was permission. It was the end of a long, lonely exile and the beginning of everything. She could not find her voice, so she just nodded, a single, decisive movement that conveyed all the years of waiting, all the hope she thought she had extinguished. That was all the confirmation Maya needed. She leaned in, closing the final inch between them. The first touch of their lips was impossibly soft, tentative, a question in itself. It was a whisper of contact, a moment of shared disbelief that this was actually happening. Clara's eyes fluttered shut, and she felt a tremor run through her entire body. It was real. Then, the kiss deepened. It was as if that first gentle touch had opened a floodgate. All the unspoken feelings, all the pent-up longing from Clara, all the new, explosive discovery from Maya, poured into the space between them. Maya's hand came up to cup Clara's jaw, her thumb stroking her cheek, while Clara's hands, as if with a will of their own, came to rest on Maya's waist, pulling her closer. The kiss was not frantic or desperate. It was a conversation, a story being told. It spoke of late nights and shared secrets, of comfortable silences and inside jokes. It spoke of the ache of unrequited love and the dizzying relief of reciprocation. It was vanilla and lavender and chamomile tea. It was the sound of rain on a window pane and the warmth of a shared bed. It was everything they had been and everything they were about to become. It was perfect. It was right. When they finally broke apart, it was not because they wanted to, but because the need for air became a pressing, physical reality. They rested their foreheads together, their breath mingling, their chests rising and falling in unison. Clara kept her eyes closed, trying to commit every single sensation to memory, the softness of Maya's lips, the feeling of her hand on her skin, the low, shaky sigh that escaped her. "Wow," Maya breathed out, the word a puff of warm air against Clara's lips. Oh, was all Clara could manage, her mind a beautiful, chaotic whirlwind of emotion. "That felt," Maya started, then trailed off as if no word was sufficient. "Right," Clara finished for her, the word a simple, profound truth. "It felt right." Maya pulled back just enough to look at her, her eyes shining with unshed tears, but this time, they were tears of joy. A slow, Radiant smile spread across her face, a smile so genuine and full of light that it stole Clara's breath all over again. "Yeah," Maya whispered, her smile unwavering. "It really did." In the quiet aftermath, with their hearts still beating a frantic rhythm against their ribs, a new feeling began to settle over them. It was a shimmering, fragile thing, born from the raw honesty of their confessions and the profound intimacy of their first kiss. But woven into its delicate threads was the cold, sharp strand of fear. "I'm scared," Clara admitted, the words barely a whisper in the silent room. She had to say it, to acknowledge the enormity of what had just happened, of the precipice they were now standing on. They had not just kissed, they had fundamentally altered the landscape of their lives. Maya's hand, still cupping Clara's cheek, tightened its grip, a small, reassuring pressure. "Me too," she confessed, her voice just as quiet, just as sincere. "I'm terrified. What does this mean? What do we do now?" The questions hung in the air, heavy and real. They had shattered the comfortable, painful stasis of their friendship, and now they were floating in the unknown. There was no map for this territory. "I don't know," Clara said, and for the first time, not knowing did not feel like a failure. It felt like a beginning. She opened her eyes, meeting Maya's earnest, frightened gaze. "But whatever it is, we figure it out. Together." A wave of relief washed over Maya's face. Together. I like the sound of that. They stayed like that for a long time, on the floor of their living room, simply holding each other. The conversation, when it came again, was soft and exploratory as they began to re-examine their shared history through this new, extraordinary lens. "All those times I complained about Ben," Maya said, her head now resting on Clara's shoulder, her voice filled with a dawning realization. "About him not listening, about feeling like something was missing. I didn't understand what I was really saying." Clara waited, her heart aching with a gentle, retroactive pain for the friend she had been comforting and for the woman she was falling for. "I was measuring him against you," Maya stated, the certainty in her voice sending a tremor through Clara. I was measuring every relationship against what I had with you. The easiness, the way you listen, the way I never have to pretend. I was holding them all up to our friendship, and they all came up short. I never understood that what I was searching for wasn't a better version of what I had, but something completely different. Something I already had." The validation in those words was a balm on the old wounds of Clara's heart. The years of silent pining, of feeling like a ghost in her own life, had not been in vain. They had been part of the foundation, the unseen groundwork for this very moment. She had not been a fool for loving Maya, she had simply been ahead of the curve. "What about Ben?" Clara asked tentatively. The name felt like a foreign word, a relic from a past life. Maya sighed, a long, weary sound. "He'll call. He'll probably send flowers. He won't understand. But it doesn't matter anymore. That part of my life is over. It was over long before tonight, I think. I just didn't have the courage to admit it." She shifted, lifting her head to look at Clara properly. "My future. I wanted to be with you. If you'll have me." The sincerity, the raw hope in that offer was almost too much to bear. "If I'll have you?" Clara echoed with a watery laugh. "Maya, I've been waiting for you my entire life. I just didn't know it was you until you showed up at my door with 2 mismatched suitcases and a ridiculously optimistic ficus tree." Maya smiled, a real, crinkle-eyed smile. "That ficus is a survivor. Just like us." They made a decision then, not in grand, sweeping promises, but in quiet, determined words. They would take it one day at a time. They would be patient with each other, and with themselves. They would navigate the fear and the uncertainty together. They would learn this new language of US, a language they had been speaking in subtext for years. They sealed the decision not with a handshake, but with another kiss, this one slower, more certain, full of the quiet promise of a new beginning. 3 months later, the world had settled into a new, beautiful rhythm. The autumn leaves had turned from green to brilliant gold and fiery red, their transformation a reflection of the one that had taken place within the walls of their small apartment. The ghost of Ben had been politely but firmly exorcised after one final, confused phone call, in which Maya had been kinder and more honest than he probably deserved. The terror of the unknown had softened, replaced by the deep, comforting certainty of a love that felt both thrillingly new and as old as time. Clara awoke slowly, drawn from a peaceful dream by the slivers of morning light filtering through the blinds. The first thing she registered was the warmth. A solid, living warmth pressed against her back. An arm was draped loosely over her waist, a hand resting on her stomach. She could feel the soft, even breaths of the person behind her on her neck. She smiled before she even opened her eyes. This was their new normal. She carefully turned in the circle of Maya's arms to face her. Maya was still asleep, her face relaxed and peaceful in the morning glow. Her blonde hair was a messy halo on the pillow, and her lips were slightly parted. Clara watched her, her heart swelling with a love so profound it felt like it was physically taking up more space in her chest. The ache that had been her constant companion for so long was gone. In its place was this quiet, expansive peace. She gently brushed a stray strand of hair from Maya's forehead. At her touch, Maya's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, they were unfocused, and then they landed on Clara, and a slow, sleepy smile spread across her face. "Morning," Maya mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. "Morning," Clara whispered back, leaning in to press a soft kiss to her lips. The kiss was easy, familiar, a part of their morning ritual now as essential as coffee. Maya hummed in contentment, tightening her arm around Clara and pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her voice still a sleepy murmur against Clara's skin. Clara rested her chin on Maya's chest, looking up into her warm, hazel eyes. "I was just thinking," she said softly, "about how different everything is." "And how not different at all." "It's strange." Maya nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I know what you mean. It feels like I've been waking up like this my whole life. Like my body knew where it was supposed to be long before my brain caught up." She paused, a look of mock seriousness on her face. "Also, you hog the blankets." Clara laughed, a light, happy sound that filled the quiet room. "I do not. You're just a human furnace." "A furnace you seem to enjoy snuggling up to," Maya countered, poking her gently in the ribs. Their playful banter was effortless, a continuation of the easy rapport they had always shared, but now it was underscored by a deep, unwavering current of love. They were still Clara and Maya, the best friends who knew each other's coffee orders and favorite movies by heart. But now they were also more. They were partners, lovers, co-pilots in this new, shared life. Later, as they stood in the kitchen making coffee, the morning sun streaming through the window and illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, Clara watched Maya as she measured out the coffee grounds. She was humming that same off-key tune she always did when she was concentrating. The sound, which had once been a source of sweet, secret pain for Clara, was now the soundtrack to her happiness. It had not all been easy. There had been moments of fear, of awkwardness, as they learned the new contours of their relationship. There had been a slightly stilted conversation with Clara's parents and a tearful, ultimately supportive one with Maya's. But through it all, they had held on to each other, their commitment to figuring it out together a constant, guiding star. Maya turned, holding out a steaming mug to Clara, their fingers brushing as she took it. The simple touch still sent a tiny spark through her, a pleasant little shock that reminded her that this was real, that this was hers. "You're staring," Maya said, though there was no accusation in her voice, only a fond amusement. "I'm allowed," Clara replied, taking a sip of the perfectly made coffee. "I have a lot of lost time to make up for." Maya's smile was soft and full of a love that still made Clara's knees feel a little weak. She stepped forward, wrapped her free arm around Clara's waist, and rested her head on her shoulder. They stood like that for a moment, two women in a sun-drenched kitchen, sipping coffee, perfectly in sync. Clara thought back to the girl she had been just a few months ago, the girl sitting on the couch, her heart a knot of silent longing, believing that this kind of happiness was meant for other people. She wished she could go back and tell her to hold on, to be brave, that the universe had a much better story planned for her than she could ever have dared to imagine. She understood now that all those years of quiet devotion had not been a waste. They had been a vigil. She had been keeping a flame alive for a love she did not even know was possible. Sometimes, the most frightening dares, the dare to hope, the dare to confess, the dare to love, led to the most beautiful discoveries. And as she stood there, wrapped in Maya's arms, safe and seen and utterly, completely loved, Clara knew, with every fiber of her being, that she was exactly where she needed to be.